finally scarcity, which is
The last 2 points, the last 2 points, the last 3 points. Hello everybody! Okay, welcome to part 2. In part 1, if you haven't watched it yet, be sure to go watch it and check it out because we talk all about how to get in touch with people, how to network, all the inbound and outbound methods of reaching out to people. So it's super helpful. Now that all that kind of stuff is done and out of the way, let's say you have your first meeting coming up. We will first talk about, what can you talk about, especially if this person is way more senior than you. And then second is, how do you maintain that relationship as well? How to network when you're an introvert. That is a really big one. So yay! Let's get started. Okay, Lily, you have been in touch with like the VPs, the execs, the MDs at like Google, Facebook, Netflix, blah, blah, blah. What do you talk to them about is the question. How do you find talking material with someone who's many levels above you? And how do you speak confidently when you're not? And I always find myself running out of topics. Are there any template questions? What are some easy conversation starters? How do you tackle first coffee chats with senior execs?
Yeah, there's a lot. The first very natural question is kind of just asking,
how's your day?
No, I know.
No, don't do that.
But I like to ask them about their story, and usually that takes up a good 10 minutes to be honest.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, you've obviously like become like this person in this position right now, but what is your story? Like, how did you get here? Where did you grow up? I just ask them like quite broad questions about themselves, and usually they will tell me that entire life story. And then by then you'll come across a couple of trends like, oh yeah, actually, at this point in time, I was thinking something like this. What do you think if I'm trying to transition from this to this? So I'm just picking out areas from their life. Yeah. And then sometimes I share my own story as well. Yeah. I think I ultimately do the same thing, which is I just try to find commonality between us two. I think also if you watched part 1, when we talk about reaching out to people during the cold outreach, you already did your stalking. You know that they have certain views or opinions about certain things. You can reference it back to that as well. Like that should always be like your backup. Oh my God, they did this podcast interview and I remember, okay, if I really have nothing else to say, let's talk about, oh my God, that podcast interview. I love it. Yeah. You talked about XYZ. Yeah, I like to also talk about like if you referenced it in your message before, like how did they come to this position to have this type of view? Then they can actually elaborate on their journey on getting to this point. Follow-up question to that is, how often do you go for one of these types of coffee chats and it turns into friendship? I would say the likelihood of becoming friendship is if I keep in contact with them. So how I usually do this is that they give you your WhatsApp, like in order to contact them to meet up. So that WhatsApp becomes a really great informal way of like keeping in contact with them, right? So then afterwards be like, thank you, like, hey, I really enjoyed this chat. Maybe you took a selfie together, like post that selfie together in the WhatsApp
She's
group.
definitely done this before. She's definitely like met up with people and posted a photo afterwards because posting photos on LinkedIn is good and tagging people on LinkedIn is good.
Yeah, and you can just send that back to them as well.
My personal favorite thing to do is if I remember telling them, oh my God, there's this book that you really should read, blah, blah. Like there's something I had referenced. As the follow-up after we parted ways, I send them a link to the video I was talking about or a link to the book I was talking about. And then that gives you an opportunity to like keep a text conversation going on.
And that kind of leads me to another point, which is that during the conversation, it's also not just about you asking about their experiences, but what they actually really, really like is to see what type of person. Are you a very curious person? Are you engaged in all these different trends? How can they work with younger people? Like I've had the CMO of a really big billion-dollar company pick my brains around how to build communities. So it's definitely like can be a two-way street.
On that note, it is, how do you provide value to senior people when you don't work with them, or how do you add value to those who are more experienced than you? I think your mentality towards this needs to shift a little bit, because if you feel like you have no value to add, you will never come across as if you have value to add. I think the easiest thing is if you're younger or you're a fresh grad or whatnot,
now less jaded, that's the value.
Nowadays, one of the most important things, everyone wants to try to get into the minds of Gen Zs and millennials. Like that is like the target audience for most people. Like that is just like the cool new hip thing that people want to know about. And that's literally what older people tend to not know about.
Wherever there's a difference, there's value that you can provide.
Damn. We just need that, like, we need it in cursive writing.
So if you're younger, you already have that. Like it's not about experience. Experience is only one area. There's all these different traits that you can bring to the table. It could be your enthusiasm, it could be your ability to be adaptable, it could be your ability to learn things really quickly. They actually are learning equally as much from you without you actually knowing that.
Yeah, one of the questions here is like, how can you be so confident when you network? Obviously there's like the mental block you need to get out of, but is there any other tips that you have?
First of all, you feel not confident when you come to the table and you don't know what you are looking for or what you want to talk about. So I think research definitely is extremely important to make yourself feel prepared. And then the second thing is to actually, like we talked about before, think about things that you can provide, differences that you have with this person that you may be able to also offer. And sometimes it could also be like, you can talk about the books that you've read together and discuss that. So it's like, you're not talking about each other, but you're talking about things that you have learned.
Things that you both like.
And both like, yeah.
And actually on that note, I think two topics that I always find are great to talk about is like sports. Most people do some type of sport. So I actually know quite a few people who manage to bond with their managers or like their CEOs or people in the industry by doing sports. It's a great way of bonding with people when you like to do the same things. If you're meeting up with someone in person or you're talking about like traveling and stuff, like if you're the type of person that knows a lot of restaurants, you can also talk about that. Like I have a Word document that I put together called Sherry Singapore Recommendations. And I'm just so type A. I listed out all my favorite restaurants. And whenever I talk to someone, they're like talking about what they're doing for the weekend. And then I send them my own recommendations list. And then that's also another conversation starter for when you text, because you'll be like, oh my God, I'm going to that restaurant this weekend. So like it really does not have to be about like work-esque stuff. It doesn't have to be about like personal development all the time. I think the more you can go off track to like personal stuff, that's where a potential friendship can like bud. So on that note then, let's shift and talk about how you network as an introvert.
Disclaimer, we're both not introverts.
Yeah, where are you on the scale?
I would say I'm an ambivert. So like I'm definitely on the extroverted side, but I'm like 60 as opposed to Sherry, who's like probably like 95 or something.
I've definitely turned slightly more introverted as I gotten older, but I'm definitely still like quite extroverted, just like talking to people.
Tip number one for introverts: people love being listened to. As long as you listen attentively, people are like, wow, that was a great conversation.
That's so true.
So you're fine.
That's such a good point, because also there are not very many good listeners out there. People always listen to speak as in like, they basically wait until you're done talking so that they can say their thing, as opposed to actually digesting what you say.
They're thinking about what they're gonna say.
Exactly. Take advantage of the fact that you're introverted and just let them do a lot of talking, because everyone loves talking about themselves.
So just ask more questions. And listen more.
But I think also one of the other things is, a lot of people, I think when they think of networking events. I think we are both not fans of going to those.
I hate networking events. It doesn't matter if you're introvert or extroverted.
Everyone there is setting out their own agenda. They don't really care about you. Everyone just has like a million business cards that they're trying to like dish out to as many people as possible.
It's about quality.
Yeah, and I honestly, even if you go to a networking event, most of the time you find that it's most valuable because you found one person that you talk to and you actually had more than just a small talk. So for introverts, it's probably easiest to have one-on-one conversations as opposed to like in a group dynamic. A lot of the things we said previously are actually quite helpful for introverts, because when you do the initial outreach online on LinkedIn, that already makes it less awkward in the first meeting, because you already had like a very brief conversation about that podcast you stalked them on. So it just makes it a little bit easier. And also, to be honest, like I think you need to know your own limits. So like if you know you get drained quite easily, then make sure you are selective about who you meet up, because
space it out.
We're in a day and age where like I don't have enough time to like be meeting up with everyone, so I really make sure that the person I'm meeting, ideally I hope that it counts. It sounds kind of bad, but we all have a finite amount of time, so you gotta pick and choose. I think it is also picking the right time and place. I think we have slightly differing opinions.
I usually pick pretty like professional hours, so it's like coffee or lunch.
I actually have done a lot of casual, like, hey, let's grab a drink after work on Tuesday. Maybe it's because different industries, or I don't know, different people that we interact with.
Usually after hours is not a great time for the people that I personally meet with, because they have families. Depends if they're local, if they're single, if they're relationships. Like it really depends.
There's a lot of variables. I think there's pros and cons to both, basically, because I find if you do it during the day, a lot of the times they're so focused on work during the day that the mindset is just not as relaxed as what I want them to be. As opposed to after work, I feel like we can still talk about work because they just left work. But we can also talk about other things without it feeling forced or weird. But of course, you also have to make sure it's comfortable for you and appropriate as females as well.
Yeah,
there are honestly just like more things that you have to worry about, unfortunately. Like you don't want people to get the wrong idea or like it to be like inappropriate, which can happen as well. I don't know. I think you gotta go with your gut feeling, okay?
Just know that there are a lot of different options.
Yeah.
And just make sure that the intention, like what the intention is clear.
Yeah. So you got the first meeting out of the way. It went well. How do you maintain the relationship? I think this is just as important as setting up the first meeting. Number one is find something you can send them a message about afterwards.
Yes.
Where, you know, the book that you talked about, the movie that you told you really like.
Regardless, any type of engagement helps. So
on
even
social media.
On social media, like that also counts as building out the relationship as well.
And then third, post a post about your meetup with them if it's appropriate, or like if you took a selfie like Lily does. Any other tips? Because some of the questions here are how do you keep up with the various relationships to maintain the connection, and how do you keep the connection after the first conversation?
Let me just talk to you about like some relationships that I've managed to maintain and examples of how I've kept them. One of the people that I have a very good relationship with is this guy called Eric Sim. He has 2 million followers on LinkedIn. A few people told me I should reach out to this guy. I reached out to this guy. I said, hey, let's meet up. He was like, no, I'm not free. And he says that to everyone, honestly. He has 2 million followers on LinkedIn, so he must get thousands of requests. Like a year later, I came across another thing that he had posted, and I said, hey, actually I'm moving to Singapore, want to catch up. And because I had said it twice, he was like, okay, let's catch up. We had that initial one-to-one conversation. During that conversation, because I just moved to Singapore and I was launching a new brand, I asked him to be the keynote speaker. So that was like engagement number 3, right? We kept in contact, and then how I solidified our relationship was like checking up with him, like what is he up to, how can I also help? And so one of the recent things he had gone into was Clubhouse. And so it was like, okay, I can help host the Clubhouse. I had written out a script, I prepared questions, and when I sent that to him, he was like, wow, like these companies are so lucky to hire you, you know? It like really built that trust of like me being competent as a person, and then him also supporting me in the various stages of my journey. So in that 3 years, we had a lot of different random interaction points.
That's a great example, actually.
Help each other.
And it's been 3 years since the first time you reached out and got rejected.
Yeah.
I love it. You gotta be shameless sometimes. Like even if they say no, you gotta just give it another go. Is there a regular cadence that you find works well?
I feel like there's no like regular time schedule, like every 2 weeks I gotta check in on this person. It's more important like in the beginning you have created a good impression, and then you like their post, you comment on the post, you engage with their stuff. And that can be until you have something worthy to engage them
like
again.
A
natural thing. Like you don't have to force it. You see that they are starting something, or you see that they are looking for something. Like maybe you can connect them with someone. But
if you have genuine interest in whatever they're doing, or like you have something to offer or whatnot, you don't have to stress about what to talk about at the second meeting anymore.
Exactly.
So I think natural is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, I definitely also try to pitch myself during the first meeting as well. Them understanding exactly like who I am, what are my values, what are the skills that I bring to the table. So then they will keep it in the back of their mind. Later on, they'll be like,
they'll remember you.
They actually consciously reach out to you to be like, hey, I want to pick your brain on this.
If you watched the video I did with Ollie, there was also a tip there that we both really agreed, and I think you will as well, is when it comes to personal branding as well, you want to be known for at least something. For example, I am known to be that girl who obviously works in tech, but also she has a YouTube channel. So from now on, when anyone's talking about like content and like influencers and things like that, they always come to me. But it's great because that's the personal brand I have. Last few questions are more about like resources, which is, can you please recommend resources, books, blogs to learn more about this topic? I've talked about this in my, I think, last video as well. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. So good. It's a book written by an ex-FBI hostage negotiator, and it is a book about negotiations, yes, but I feel like there are just a lot of tips for you know, following up with people, or like just human interaction in general.
We have this favorite technique called the no technique, which is basically instead of asking them, are you still free tomorrow, etc. Instead, you make it a no question, which is, are you no longer interested in meeting up now?
The logic behind it, at least from what Never Split the Difference said, is people feel inclined to correct you. When, you know, you say, are you no longer interested? They'll be like, oh, no, I still am.
But these are all the reasons why I just had in the background that you may not have realized.
Now you can like problem solve it with them.
Right.
I have a really, really, really good YouTube channel everyone should check out. Charisma on Command.
Really good.
Hallelujah. It is so good. I love the way the person that has the YouTube channel breaks down movie characters, celebrities. They basically talk about how people are charismatic, how are they confident, and ways that you can fake it. And it's so concrete. You watch a 5-minute video and you can practice it right away the next day at work.
Yeah.
So good. I would say those are like the two that I would absolutely reference all the time. Also, Lily has a book that she really likes.
Yeah, this book is called The Psychology of Influence by Robert Cialdini. It has basically like 6 main factors in creating influence, whether it's you're doing marketing or you're building a relationship. The first one is reciprocation, which is basically if you do something for someone, then they're more likely to reciprocate, right? So when you are creating a relationship with someone, you want to actually like give them something so that later on, if you need something as well, I mean, it's mutually beneficial, basically, is what it is.
Yeah.
The second one is commitment and consistency. In order to create commitment, you want to kind of give them a smaller carrot to start with.
Yeah.
So for example, what we were talking about is that, you know,
You don't want to ask people to be your mentor.
Yeah, exactly.
Right off the bat.
when
it's like,
they're
I
like,
don't
wow,
wanna,
dude,
I don't want to do like
know
a
you
weekly
yet.
call with you, bro. Like,
Exactly. But you could be like, oh, let's have a 10-minute chat.
Yeah.
Okay, they're much more obliged to have this chat
it's
with
the foot in the door technique, basically.
Exactly.
Like,
So once you've had that 10-minute chat, then you can move on to a coffee chat or something else. Third one is social proof. We associate the people that we meet with people who they know. So this could be referrals, like warm leads, like who are they associated with.
You're more likely to meet up with someone that you know your friends already have approved of. I mean, it's literally the reason why we know each other as well.
Exactly, yeah.
We both know this person called Jamie, so
Yeah.
we're like, okay, fine,
And
let's meet up.
she's like, Jamie's cool, so in association, Lily must be cool too.
Yeah.
Fourth is liking. Obviously, you have to be likable. So if you're not,
don't be an ass, okay?
Work on your emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Know how to like read the room. People just like working with people that they like.
Yeah.
Right? That's the reality.
Yeah, for sure.
Authority. So how much authority you have over the certain subject. The last one is scarcity. Scarcity, which is your time scarcity. People want what they can't have, right? We mentioned before in the last video that you need to have a call to action when you're reaching out to people. And one tip that I had suggested is that you give 2 times. You don't want to make it seem like your entire schedule is open for them. You're giving them when you're available. Your time is scarce as well. And these are the ones they have to pick.
See, I do think that makes a huge difference because as with anything, it doesn't matter how junior, young, whatever you are, you control the narrative.
Exactly.
And the way you carry yourself shows even in the messages you send. So I like it when you go to any meeting, any table, and you just are equals.
Yes.
That's the only way you can have the most constructive conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So be humble, but
Don't think of yourself as too little.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you've got a lot to offer.
exactly.
Anyway, those are all our tips for today. Thank you so much for offering your advice on everything networking related.
Thanks for having me.
Hope this helps all of you with your networking and your job opportunity seeking. And if you have any questions, obviously leave it down below. Lily and I will do our best to answer your questions.
Awesome.
And we will see you guys very
week.
soon.